And for the lady, perhaps a salad?
Perhaps not. I'll have the steak smothered in onions, a rack of ribs, pasta with extra garlic, French fries with lots of vinegar, and a side of onion rings with lots and lots of sauerkraut.
Learning more this afternoon about the couple killed in the side along with their 2 children. Matthew Mitchell and T. Mitchell own the Travelers Table and Travelers Cart restaurants in Montrose. The restaurant posted a new statement a short time ago, and our Gochialoga is outside of one of the popular spots with how the close-knit community is reacting.
Right now, the Travelers Table is open and is operating at normal, regular business hours. In fact, the company just posted on Instagram earlier today that hospitality comes from within and that they want to honor the Travelers' legacy. Now, the Houston restaurant community is still in shock by all of this, but so is Houston's fashion community because T owned her own clothing line.
I admired her intelligence, her creativity.
I didn't feel like I could believe it until I heard it, that it was actually them.
Hard to believe, especially because, according to court records, there were no prior domestic violence calls or other issues reported at the Mitchell family home.
On the evening of May 4th, 2026, a babysitter made a phone call. She had not heard from the family since the night before. No reply to messages, no answer on the phone. For most families, that might mean nothing. A busy weekend, a dead battery, people caught up in their own lives. But she knew this family, and the silence was wrong. Houston police arrived at 2113 Kingston Street in the River Oaks neighborhood at 5:26 in the evening for a routine welfare check. River Oaks is not the kind of neighborhood where you expect to find anything wrong. It is one of the most affluent areas in the entire city. Manicured streets, multi-million-dollar properties, the kind of place where the biggest concern on any given Monday is traffic on the way to dinner. Officers went to the door. What was inside that home stopped everything. 4 people, a husband, a wife, a little girl, a little boy, all gone. The children were found in their beds. The wife was pregnant. And the entire city of Houston, a city that had just celebrated this family, featured them, awarded them, followed them, had absolutely no idea anything was wrong. That is the part that does not leave you, because this was not a family living in the shadows. This was not a household nobody knew. These were 2 of the most recognized names in Houston's restaurant world. People with a Food Network feature, a Restaurateur of the Year award, 50 colleagues through their doors just days before this happened. A woman who had just been asked to join a board. A wife who was still posting on Instagram the week she died. Visible, celebrated, completely exposed to the world. And whatever was happening behind that door, nobody caught a single sign of it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Crime Prism. If you are new here, this is the place where we look at real crime cases from every angle. If this is your kind of content, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything. All right, let's talk about this. First, let's talk about this family and what they looked like from the outside. And from the outside, they looked like everything. Matthew Mitchell was not a man who did things halfway. Before he ever set foot in a kitchen, he had already lived 2 full careers. He studied at Emory University, spent time across Europe, France, Italy, Oxford, then built a journalism career working out of London, Paris, and New York. After that, he pivoted completely into pharmaceuticals, eventually rising to president and CEO of a Texas-based clinical research company, a career most people would have been content to retire on. He wasn't done. He walked away from all of it, trained at the Art Institute of Houston, and set his sights on the restaurant world. A third reinvention, from CEO to restaurateur. Most people don't successfully rebuild once. Matthew had done it twice before he ever opened a single door. T. Mitchell was 39, a Vietnamese-American woman who grew up right there in Houston. She had her own impressive path, degrees from the University of Houston and Penn State, followed by human resources leadership roles at multiple Fortune 500 companies in hospitality and retail. The kind of career that takes years to build and discipline to maintain. But like Matthew, she was never going to be satisfied working inside someone else's vision. They met around 2010. I fell in love over a shared obsession with food and travel. 2 people who had both seen enough of the world to know exactly what kind of life they wanted to build together. They married in Mexico. And in 2019, they turned that shared vision into something real, opening Travelers Table in Houston's Montrose neighborhood. A restaurant built entirely around the idea that food is the most honest way to experience cultures beyond your own. Global dishes, bold flavors, a concept that was completely and entirely theirs. Houston noticed immediately. Then the rest of the country did too. Travelers Table earned a feature on Guy Fieri's Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives on Food Network. If you know anything about the restaurant industry, you know what that means. That is not just exposure. That is a restaurant becoming part of the American food conversation. Families across the country watching from their living rooms, adding it to their list, planning trips around it. By 2024, they had expanded, launching Traveler's Cart as a second concept. T had also stepped outside the restaurants entirely, launching her own travel-inspired clothing line in 2023. 2 restaurants, a fashion brand, 2 children. And at the time of her death, T was pregnant with their 3rd child. In 2025, the Houston chapter of the Texas Restaurant Association named them Restaurateurs of the Year. Their Instagram told the same story their accolades did. A couple in love building something extraordinary, fully present in their own lives. Events, milestones, moments, all of it documented, all of it warm, all of it completely believable. From the outside, the Mitchell family was not just successful, they were the dream. And that is exactly what makes what comes next so impossible to process, because the dream had an address, and officers had just been called to it. 6 days before police arrived at that door, T. Mitchell was standing in her own restaurant surrounded by 50 people who wanted to be in the same room as her. She had just hosted a Houston Restaurant Association social at Travelers Table. The energy was exactly what you would expect from a woman at the height of her influence, warm, magnetic, the kind of evening that reminds an entire industry why it does what it does. The association had personally asked her to join their board. She said yes. From the outside, everything was accelerating. She made one last post with Matthew that week, a video, lighthearted, the kind of thing a happy wife posts about a husband she adores. In her post, she jokingly said something about her husband thinking they would grow old together, but he might outlive her. Maybe this came up as a result of their age difference or something. But whatever it was, it looked like a joke. The internet smiled at it, shared it, moved on. Nobody looked closer. Why would they? By Sunday, the family had gone quiet. No returned messages, no answered calls. For a woman as present and visible as T. Mitchell, someone who had just been in a room full of colleagues days earlier, the silence had a texture to it that the people closest to her could not ignore. Her babysitter and her sister had been trying to reach the family since Sunday night. By Monday evening, trying was no longer enough. They made the call, and at 5:26 p.m. on May 4th, 2026, Houston police arrived at that door. What officers encountered inside that house on Kingston Street was not something a welfare check prepares you for. 4 people, all with gunshot wounds. Matthew Mitchell, 52, T. Mitchell, 39, and pregnant. Their young children. The children were found in their beds. Evidence at the scene pointed investigators in one direction. Matthew had shot his wife and his 2 children before turning the weapon on himself. No forced entry, no sign of anyone else. Nothing to suggest the violence had come from outside that home. Houston police named Matthew Mitchell as the suspect. The Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences began the process of formally identifying the victims. And the city that had just handed this family their highest industry honor was suddenly trying to find the words for something that had none. But here's where this case takes a turn that has kept people unsettled ever since. Because when investigators started looking for answers, a note, a record, something that explained how a family this visible arrived at this moment, they found nothing. Not a single prior call to that address. No criminal history, no civil disputes, no financial filings pointing to crisis, no paper trail of any kind that would have raised one flag about the Mitchell family to any system designed to catch these things before they happen. No note was left behind. Houston police confirmed the case remains under investigation. They have not released a motive. They have not spoken publicly about what, if anything, was happening inside that marriage. That is where the official record ends, and that is exactly where the questions begin. When authorities have no answers, the public builds their own. And in the case of the Mitchell family, the speculation did not take long to start, because the gap between who this family appeared to be and what happened inside that house was so wide that people's minds could not rest inside it comfortably. Something had to fill it, so people started looking. The first thing they looked at was the professional dynamic between Matthew and T. Because when you trace the arc of this family's public story carefully, something becomes very clear. The higher Travelers Table climbed, the more T became the face of everything they had built together. She was the one with the board seat, the fashion line, the collaboration requests, the gravitational pull that drew people toward her professionally. Her PR team described her after her death as someone who was always on her own journey, always looking for the next adventure. For a tribute, it is a beautiful line, but some people heard something else in it entirely. Because Matthew Mitchell was not that story. Matthew was a man who had already peaked twice, a former journalist, a former pharmaceutical CEO, a man who had reinvented himself more than most people attempt in a lifetime, and was now building a third chapter largely in the background of his wife's ascending present. 13 years older, a resume that looked backward while hers pointed forward. What does it do to a man like that, watching the woman beside him outgrow every version of the life they had built together? Nobody can answer that. But people asked it. Then came the theory that cut deeper than all the others, quietly, persistently, across social media. A specific speculation began circulating, that the marriage was not what it appeared to be in those final weeks. That T may have been preparing to leave, that Matthew may have known something was ending, and that whatever happened inside that house on the night of May 3rd was connected to that knowledge in a way investigators have neither confirmed nor denied. There is no record to support it. No source has gone on record with it, but it is the theory that has proven most difficult to shake because it is the only framing that gives the timeline any kind of shape. A man who had already lost 2 careers, watching his marriage become the next thing he was about to lose. And then there is the pressure that nobody talks about because it does not fit the dream. 2 restaurants, a fashion brand, a Food Network profile to maintain, a River Oaks mortgage, 2 children, a third on the way. The restaurant industry is not kind behind the curtain. It is expensive, unpredictable, and relentless in a way that the awards and the television features do not capture. Some people began asking quietly whether the surface that looked so polished was carrying more weight than anyone outside those walls ever knew. But here is the truth that sits underneath every single one of these speculations. None of them have been confirmed. None of them may ever be. Because the only person who could have explained what pushed that night to where it went made sure he would never have to answer for it. No note, no record, no explanation. Just a city full of people holding questions that may never find the answers they deserve. As of today, the Mitchell case remains open. Houston police have not released a motive. No additional details about the events of that night have been made public. The Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences has been working through the formal identification process, and investigators have asked anyone with information to contact the HPD Homicide Division directly. That is the entirety of what is officially known, and that silence from authorities. In a case this public, involving people this visible, has itself become part of what unsettles people. Because usually when something this significant happens, there is movement, a detail that surfaces, a record that emerges, something that starts to build toward an explanation, even if the full picture takes time. Here there has been nothing. The people who knew T best have largely asked for space and privacy, grieving in the way that people grieve when the loss does not make sense and the circumstances make it harder. What the community has offered instead is tribute. The Houston Restaurant Association put out a statement describing T as a ray of light, someone who inspired everyone around her. Chef Jassi Bindra, who had been actively building a collaboration with her, spoke about her energy and her genuine love for the industry, someone he was in the middle of creating something with when the news came through. Stevie Vu, director of operations at the Asia Society Texas Center, posted a tribute asking people not to speculate, just to surround her memory with the care and dignity she deserved. Her sister confirmed the deaths publicly. The family asked for privacy, for space to grieve something that no family should ever have to grieve. And the doors of Traveler's Table and Traveler's Cart stayed open. The staff kept showing up, kept cooking, kept serving. A statement from the restaurants asked for unity and respect, saying that hospitality comes from within, and that to honor the traveler's legacy, they would continue to welcome people through those doors. Sometimes the most honest thing you can do for someone who poured their life into something is simply refuse to let it go dark. The investigation continues, and until authorities release something concrete, a motive, a detail, anything, the Mitchell family remains exactly where this case began. A household that looked perfect from every angle the world could see, and a door that nobody saw coming. I want to stay with T for a moment before wrap this up, because this story has a way of pulling your attention toward the horror of what happened. The investigation, the theories, the unanswered questions, and in the middle of all of that, it becomes very easy to lose the person at the center of it. T. Mitchell was a Vietnamese-American woman who built something extraordinary. She earned every room she walked into, a woman whose own team described her as always on her own journey, always looking for the next adventure. She was 39. She was pregnant. She had every reason to believe the best of her life was still ahead of her. And then there are children, found in their beds. They did not have a conflict with anyone. They did not have a side in whatever was happening between the adults in that house. They were simply children living inside a life they had barely started. That is the part that lingers long after everything else fades. That is the part that should sit uncomfortably with all of us. Murder-suicide is not a solution. It is the most permanent and most selfish expression of pain, one that does not just end one story, but reaches across and erases everyone else's along with it. If this made you think, share this video, drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know what you think happened inside that house. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We will be following this case as new details emerge. See you on the next one.